Heather O'Neill is a Canadian novelist, poet, short story writer, screenwriter, and journalist who published her debut novel, Lullabies for Little Criminals, in 2006. It won the 2007 Canada Reads competition and the Hugh MacLennan Prize for fiction and went on to become an international bestseller. Her forthcoming novel, When We Lost Our Heads, will be available in February 2022. Welcome to the Bibliophile Book Club.
Thank you. It's fun to be here. But I love book clubbing. It's one of the things I've missed during the pandemic. It's just having people crowd into my house and discussing books. It's so mysterious what comes out of people's mouths in book clubs, like things you would never believe they had inside them or strange hidden depths that they haven't articulated elsewhere. So I'm always interested in the philosophical sides of people that really come out in book clubs. A book it puts on the table all these inability to converse about deeper subjects and raw feelings and speak about the unspeakable, and it makes it a permissible place.
You mean like sex with dogs, for example?
Yes, he's referring to the book.
Yeah, so let me jump into that.
Yeah.
The book that you've chosen for us to discuss, it's called The Notebook, and it's the first in a trilogy, not by Agota Kristoff, but by Agota Kristoff. The second novel is The Proof, the third is The Third Lie. Now I'm just going to read a little bit about these and then we'll get into it. Mm-hmm. These three internationally acclaimed novels have confirmed Kristoff's reputation for one of the provocative exponents of, quote, new wave European fiction. With all the stark simplicity of a fractured fairy tale, the trilogy tells the story of twin brothers locked in an agonizing bond that becomes a gripping allegory for the forces that have divided brothers in much of Europe since World War II. The Notebook starts off the saga in which the brothers are children lost in a country torn by conflict, who must learn every trick of evil and cruelty merely to survive. That's the blurb on the back of the book that we have. Kristoff was born in Hungary, and she left her homeland during the revolution in 1956 to settle in Switzerland, where she wrote primarily for the theater and died in 2011. So why did you pick this book?
Well, the first time I encountered this book, someone gave me a copy when I was quite young, maybe 18 or 19, and I'd never heard of it before, and the way it was passed to me was in a mysterious way where my friend said, nobody actually knows if Agota Kristoff is a real person or if it is a collective of some secret society who wrote this book in Europe, and nobody knows exactly what language it was written in. And they handed it to me. Of course, none of that was true, but that was back in the day before internet, when you can fables were passed along with books and stories. And when I did read it, it began to feel very much as though something passed the way a fairy tale is, that it had somehow existed in oral history before it was put on the page. Because one of the things, it's situated, you're not entirely sure when and where, and it's just described as a country, and there's the big town and the small town. And even the descriptions are so simple. Like at one point, there was 2 rivers. And they're like, all you need to know about the rivers is one is big and one is small. And so it's in this very kind of mysterious, but of course it resonates when you read it. It has a feel of a World War II narrative, just in that language. And it's written so starkly in these very short sentences, and it reads like a children's book in a strange way. Like it's very short, but with such perversity and strangeness that they encounter that it's almost as though Yeah, it's a testimony to something strange. It's a testimony to this horrific but marvelous land, in the sense that it is a tale of childhood, but the childhood happens to be taking place in this very brutal war where the children are separated from their mother.
Speaking of children.
So when I read it, it was one of those books that were just so incredibly magical to me, because I write in a very visual way, and this book, its style is to make it almost entirely visual without commentary. So there was something that I was learning about the staging of imagery, like how you stage an image.
Yeah.
It can be so devastating and important, and you don't need all the writing around it to tell the reader that here comes an important moment. If you just stage it properly so that it comes at the right moment, it just hits you like a punch and you can't forget it. So I like that, and it was magnetic, and you're just so in the world. And so I kind of kept rereading it over the years, and every time I read it, it was equally real, but so different. And it's funny, I read it a couple nights ago, because we were doing our book club, and for me it was, once again, it was such a different experience, but this time I found it kind of close to my own life. And then I was reading my own autobiography of like my childhood within it, and then I was understanding in that way, whereas when I first read it, I was somewhat of a child, so I was just what appealed more to me was all the shocking elements and the kind of raw sexuality. Like, you don't see a lot of even writing about childhood desire is still taboo in literature. So I found that intriguing when I first read it. What I found most intriguing about it when I read it a few nights ago was the idea that there are these children, and they've decided somehow, because they're given to their grandmother in the country during the war.
By their mother.
Because they have to be evacuated from the big town and go live in hiding. And their grandmother is so brutal, and it's such a radically different, because they had a very sort of elitist childhood and very educated background, and they're dropped into this rural countryside, and they decide to stamp out all their childish sentimentalities and become these survivors, and what it is to become a survivor in a brutal childhood.
Yeah, I mean, page 1, they're dropped off, and what they've got is like a little suitcase with their clothes, plus their father's big dictionary.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, it's like, these kids are, maybe they're not quite normal, because they want to spend their time studying and doing exercise.
Yeah, and even that, like, every detail in this book is such a huge clue. Like, everything is so important. And it's beautiful, too, in the way there's these two beautiful twin boys, and they have this big dictionary, and they come as they're what they're going to need to survive.
Yes, survive.
They're going to need words. So there's something about language that's going to help them survive. And through the book, they change languages. They learn the enemy's language. The grandmother knows the liberator's language. Yeah, and I was reading once an interview with Agota Kristoff, because she's Hungarian, and she wrote it in French, and she said
it's when she was living in Switzerland.
So that the sense of using somebody else's language and not having the sort of that intuitive ability with your mother tongue, I don't know, there's something magical. So it's right, in the first paragraph, we know these two are going to use language, but they're going to use it in a different way, and they're going to use words. They're going to re-examine the meaning of every word.
Their language is sophisticated, too sophisticated. It's almost stilted, and there is a character that comments on that. But as you said too, the mother drops the kids off with her mother, and they hate each other.
Yeah.
Like, very simple, straightforward language here. Here's an example. This is what the mother says. Bitches have 4 or 5 puppies at a time. You keep 1 or 2 and drown the others.
Yeah.
And then their mother starts crying. She's a witch, this old bag.
Yeah, she is, and it's remarkable somehow that the mother got away from all that. Like, there's later someone tells the kids, it's amazing your mother got out of this town, because the mother sort of went off and created a different identity, and she married a writer, and she lives in the big city with educated people and is raising the children in this really coddled, wonderful way.
Right.
So of course she has to leave. I mean, that's part of what the book is about. Like, how can two realities exist? How can you be kind and wonderful and
loving mother.
And loving and delicate and amusing, like when you know that horror exists. And then at the same time, how do you become horrific and deal with all the brutalities of the world and yet maintain some form of love and innocence? And the two kind of can't reconcile in the book. So the two, when we see the grandmother and the mother, it's like, it's not even that they hate each other, they just can't exist on the same page. So the grandmother is like, get off of this page, get out of this story, how dare you return to the land of fairy tale? And the mother just says, I have to leave my children in the land of fairy tale.
I didn't know that they were two boys to start with, so I was thinking, okay, you got your witch, you got a forest, this is Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that these two boys got love. Their mother kept telling them about how much she loved them. But what they proceed to do is to try and take the pain away from losing that love by making themselves immune to pain.
Yeah,
so
they have all these strange exercises.
That's right. Like, I figure they're training themselves to be stoics.
Yeah.
You know, because it's too painful to face what's happened.
I wonder if it's also a way of being clear-eyed, because they don't want to be submerged in sentimentality and fear and terror, because they see themselves as observers, and this notebook is a record. Like, the book itself, as they mention at one point, they're actually writing the book, and it's a transcription of what they're seeing. They feel that it's important they look on it without any judgment, because it makes for a better record. Otherwise, it would just be pages of, I miss my mother, I miss my mother.
Yes.
They're kind of training themselves in a way to be writers.
Yes. It's a bit further along. There's simple language. They're kind of showing and not necessarily. There's a line about how they don't like to use the word love, because you can love things in different ways. It's not
It has
accurate.
No definite meaning.
Yeah. Okay. She calls them sons of bitches. That's what she does. That's the grandmother.
A passage that really struck out with the grandmother too has been, the boys are always spying on everybody in this book. There are always holes and peepholes in the walls that they can see through. And there's one where they watch the grandmother undressing, but she's never naked. She takes off one or two layers, but there's always one underneath. And I thought that was interesting, because there are just so many layers of hardness to the grandmother. You could never get to who the grandmother actually is.
You're right.
And who she was. Truth. Yeah. You can't with the grandmother. And every time they spy on her, they can't actually catch her doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's simple language. The forest is very big. The stream is very small. But it really is kind of captivating. It's if you want to continue to read.
Oh, it's impossible to put down, and it's so simple and quick, but then also things sneak up on you. Everybody they meet has their own perversion and sadistic behavior. They have a neighbor who they refer to as Hair Lip, because they don't actually know her name. She has a facial deformity.
Yes.
Who's so starved for love, she just tries to have sex with anything. But her desire it's probably the only pure thing in the book, Hairlip's desire to be loved.
Well, let's get to that, because there's a lot to think about with that.
Yes.
They come across her having sex with a dog, and so where is that?
It's very close at the beginning.
It's not yet.
It's the next one, there.
The nice thing, too, is that each chapter
You've passed it.
Oh, have I?
Yeah.
Each chapter is really short too, so you really feel like you're making quick progress, which I like.
Yeah, and I know when I was their age, I kept a journal.
Yeah.
And then you record the events of the day. And sometimes when you read back childhood journals, they're so peculiar what you've decided to take note of. And as though it's important, like an argument at the table. So they're written actually in that way, where it's just this happened and that happened and this strange thing happened and that thing happened. But the peculiar thing is that what happens is so outrageous, and each chapter is filled with observations that no child should be actually observing.
Because they're spying on people all the time. But so I'm not having trouble. I'm trouble finding it.
Wait, okay, wait. Our chores. Maybe it comes after. It's
no rush here.
Okay.
I'll edit it.
Okay, keep going. Next chapter. 1, 2.
Yeah, because
3.
they find this soldier in the forest, and they say only his eyes missing because of the crows. That's very powerful. Just the description.
And their lack of, whenever they don't say anything about it, it makes it seem even colder.
Yeah, well, they do seem to be emotionless, and I think they may have numbed themselves out on purpose.
Yeah. I read one interpretation that kept referring to them as immoral, but I didn't agree with that, because I find what they do is they set up their own morality of who is not good and bad, but who is mistreating other people. And then they deliver justice very harshly when they find anybody being cruel to poor people or just like abusing prisoners of war.
Yeah.
So they do have an incredibly strong moral stance. They're little executioners in a sense, where they sneak around during the war. They observe what people are doing through peepholes, and they punish those actions of ordinary civilians during the war.
Well, that's the thing too. During the war, you might die the next day. So morals, having sex with someone is something you do is almost like, if it's a woman, I think, as a gift, because you know he's going to die the next day. So if that's what he wants, see, that's accurate?
No. Well, because there's so many people in the book who try to molest the two boys.
Yes. I guess I'm just making a comment on how...
On general, well, their thing is they're fine with consensual sex. So that's part of their morality. When they observe two people having consensual sex, even if it's perverse or involves bondage or whatever out in the open in some field, they're totally fine with that. But when they see sex that's not consensual, or it crosses the line in that, for instance, the priest is molesting the young girl near their house, and that they immediately blackmail him and start to punish the priest because of that.
Yes.
But they have no trouble with sex outside of it, outside of anything.
No.
So for consensual sex, they see nothing wrong with that, or anything immoral or depraved.
Okay.
I would say.
I'm on page 13, now 14. Let's look at the fact that the grandmother never washes. She's filthy all the time, right?
Yeah.
What does that say?
She refuses in any way to make where they're living nice for them. She refuses to do any decoration, any cleaning up. She never touches them.
But she doesn't seem to care about it being dirty. She doesn't mind being dirty.
No, because she exists in a state of war and surviving the war, and she takes the children in. And for her, this is reality, and to clean up would just be a lie to her, because why would she do that? Because it would only
self-respect?
Yeah, but I think she doesn't care what other people think of her ever.
Okay.
And I think part of her not cleaning is to show other people she doesn't care what they think of them. She doesn't care if she stinks for other people. She doesn't care if she looks grotesque, if they think she's a witch or a bitch. I mean, they've been gossiping about her for years and years. So I think it's almost a defense mechanism where she doesn't even try to be acceptable. And she wants to be left alone, essentially, by everybody.
In that chapter on dirt, it said, at the very end, it says, we smell of a mixture of manure, fish, grass, mushrooms, smoke, milk, cheese, mud, clay, earth, sweat, urine, and mold. We smell bad, like grandma.
Yeah.
So it's funny, typically when I go to a restaurant to do an interview, every freaking noise in the whole world decides to show up. So we've got babies, we got cars, but anyway, hopefully we can hear through it all. So so the next chapter is exercise to toughen the body. Mm-hmm. Grandmother often hits us. We decide to toughen our bodies.
They decide to become harder in order to withstand the pain. You know, it's an interesting question because, which the end of the book kind of deals with, but yes, they develop a method for surviving during the war and not feeling pain. But by cutting that out, are they no longer becoming human and then losing their essential selves?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better just to feel pain every time you're being beaten than to take away that part of you?
Yeah, what kind of life is it if you don't have any emotion or feeling?
So that's the thing with the war, because the war, and then when the war ends, then who are you?
Right. There's an orderly that shows up at the house, and I guess he works for the officer that lives there, and the grandmother doesn't seem to give a shit about if they've got blankets, but he does. He brings them some army blankets. And he tells the old witch not to sell that. And if she does mean to, you tell me and I'll bang, bang, I'll kill her. So that's kind of kind in a gross sort of way.
Yeah, there are people throughout the book who are kind to the children because despite the fact that they constantly see themselves as these little monsters who have hardened themselves against the world, when people meet them, they're always surprised by their physical beauty and also the manner in which they speak, which seems to be more educated than everyone around. So everybody sees them and they're so peculiar. They're often referred to as these little angels that appear. Mm-hmm. And so people do give them things because they want to approach innocence during the war, where the children insist that they're not innocent.
Yeah, so we talked about the fact that they want to sort of immunize themselves against pain here. We must forget my darlings, my loves, my joy, these words, because nobody says such words to us now, and because our memory of them is too heavy a burden to bear. And by force of repetition, these words gradually lose their meaning and pain. They're talking about the abuse that they're getting from their grandmother. Mm-hmm. So again, it's really interesting how they're smart enough to almost, they're avoiding pain, which maybe isn't so smart. That's what we all do.
Yeah, I think where they seem intelligent is they're articulating what they're doing, but I think many children who are put in these situations, in dark situations, this is what they intuitively do. They become harder, they become resistant, they become crueler to those around them. They engage in games that make them physically tougher. So it's just interesting that these two are articulating it and putting it in words, this methodology of surviving childhood violence.
And this is exactly what a lot of people do, especially if they've got parents that aren't giving them love.
Yeah, exactly. It's a way to survive, to kind of make yourself into a cruel stone. It was terrifying because they do, more as the book comes on, a lot of people refer to them and they're just terrified. And it's like, watch out for those two little maniacs. They'll slit your throat without thinking about it.
Well, they do later do that, too, which is quite shocking. I didn't expect them to do what they did.
And that plays into the question of morality, because they did quite like the woman that they tried to murder, but she acts in a way that infringes upon their moral code, where she mocks prisoners of war.
The situation I'm talking about is where this woman, I can't remember which one it is, but says she wants to die, and they say okay, and they kill her with a razor.
Oh yes, Harelip's mother. Yeah, they end up killing a lot of people, actually.
Right. Well, a lot of people end up dead.
Yeah.
Like their parents, both their parents. But they read the Bible for diction and memorization. And
exactly. That's another interesting thing, where they have a Bible, but they don't read it as Christians. They read it as though it's a novel.
Well, this is probably I think one of the central chapters. Is called Our Studies. Mm-hmm. And it's not ham-handed, but it's basically saying, yeah, okay, we're writing this book called The Notebook, mm-hmm. and here's how we are doing it. We start writing, and to decide whether it's good or not good, we have a very simple rule. The composition must be true. We must describe what is, what we see, what we hear, what we do. So that's pretty good advice for the writer, huh? This is, maybe it's not, but we would write, we eat a lot of walnuts, and not, we love walnuts. Because the word love is not a reliable word. It lacks precision and objectivity.
I find it goes counter to the way you write fiction, because in fiction you would write, especially if it's first person, the only point of first person is not to say she eats, third person is she eats a lot of walnuts. She seems to enjoy them.
Right.
Therefore, she seems to enjoy them. First person is, I love walnuts. They remind me, like, in so much subjectivity around the walnut. Why you enjoy it, how exactly it makes you feel, if it fills you up, if it reminds you of some Christmas. Yes. So they're just like taking all of that fictional nonsense away. That comes with, I think, adult literature.
To love walnuts and to love mother don't mean the same thing. The first expression designates a pleasant taste in the mouth, the second a feeling. Words that define feelings are very vague. It is better to avoid using them and stick to the description of objects, human beings, and oneself. That is to say, to the faithful description of facts.
Yeah, so it's the whole show don't tell, but taken to a radical extreme.
Well, okay, so this book is written in the present. The whole thing's in the present tense. Yeah. And I suspect it's following these guidelines. Mm-hmm. And it's damn good.
Yeah.
So... And I like this idea of, well, love being not as precise.
Yeah. I feel like, I think I'll go do an exercise now, tonight, where I just describe. No, like, stepping in with the whole romantic era of how simple things make you feel for 800 pages.
Well, it's interesting. It brought up a memory of a description of Paul Bowles' writing and how great it is because it's so descriptive. It was some luggage or something. Mm-hmm. It was just a few short sentences, but they said all the other stuff that really doesn't need to be said in a beautiful way that captivates you.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing about writing, is not to lose the reader.
The style is so remarkable and catches you that you're able to do that. So it's like someone like Jean Rees, who I really like, whatever she writes about, and she'll write quite, in her early books, quite simple descriptions.
Yeah.
But her style is so soaked in melancholy, in alcohol, in depression, that even if she describes a bee landing on the side of her glass and falling in, it's just seems like the end of the world. Just like, oh, sadness. Why do we try? So when you establish kind of such a intense style, you can get away with leaving out descriptions.
Okay. Well, suddenly I found the important scene. It's right after, it just happens to be right after the chapter that describes good writing and what they're trying to do with their writing, and it's called Our Neighbor and Her Daughter. Once we catch her drinking milk by sucking the udder of one of our goats. It's always we, too. That kind of bugs me a bit. It's like, come on, like, you're individuals. You're not we.
I don't know. I really love that part of the book. The whole idea.
The we? Everything is we? It's like they're Siamese twins.
Yeah, and there's a part, but she describes, like, at one point the mother tried to separate them by putting them in different classes and they fall unconscious.
Yes.
So it also made me think, to what extent are we dealing with us kind of fractured personality in the before and after? Like, is one side of you, like, you're seeing yourself as two different people. Like, they're identical in every way to the point they just say we all the time, and everybody speaks to them as one single person. So it makes you wonder, are they just one single person? There's a kind of the child inside who before the war was coddled and read poetry to and went around the big town with their writer parents. Or there's the other side, and how do you, like, the change in their life is so extreme that of course it's going to cause this fracture. And how do those two this together? Because then you have that ending, the remarkable ending, which kind of asks that question.
Well, when father died, they basically sacrificed the father for their life.
For one of them to escape, but then one stays.
That's right. So
and then you're
separated.
Like, so does one return to the civilized world, but one is forced to stay? And is that the way?
Is that the way we are built?
Yeah, and is that the way we face trauma? Is there always some, can we even help? I mean, unless you think of time as linear, which, I mean, I don't. So is there some, if you endure trauma, is that traumatized self still existing in that moment in the past? And is there anything you can do to save that person, or do you have to save yourself and leave that person behind? And what is your relationship to that past self of yours who endured such horrifying things when you are now free of it?
You can't ever be free of that.
Yeah,
pain.
But do you try and bring them with you, or to what extent do you try and alienate that person you were? I mean, that's why some people, when they have really terrible pasts, will move countries entirely, and it's almost as though they're escaping their childhood self. Will just then show up one day with a knock on the door, and it's like, I'm still in pain. And I'm like, oh no, I thought I was this person who escaped all that.
Yeah, do you fight against it? Do you try and immunize yourself against it? Or do you bring it along with you
and if you
allow
do bring
it
it
to
along,
experience life?
Yeah, you do. But then it's also, that self comes out and acts in all sorts of, maybe it's damaging, causing like abuse, or causing you to enact abuse in other people. So what do you do with this little monster? Or
you're attracted to an alcoholic because that's what you know.
Yeah, exactly. So who is that person?
Yeah, and how much control do you have over them?
Yeah.
They have a conversation with Hairlip about, we work and study, that's what they say. She says, I beg, steal, and play. It's like they're opposites.
Yeah.
But they also show kindness to her. If you need anything for your mother or for yourself, you have only to ask us. We'll give you fruit, vegetables, fish, and milk. And she starts shouting, I don't want your fruit, your fish, your milk. I can steal all that. What I want is for you to love me. I thought, well, you know what? Bringing a person food is love. It's showing it, as opposed to what? Just saying I love you?
Yeah, and I think that's who they've become. Like, they're actually kind, innately moral children. So they are able to provide for people during the war, but they've decided, like, they can't come close to love or anything that resembles love. They've kind of taken that and put it in a box as something illogical, because the minute they start feeling love or doing things because they like people or dislike people, they're not going to be able to survive this war, because as it goes along,
because they might lose them.
Yeah, horrible things happen to Hairlip, which they would never have been able to deal with if they had allowed themselves to love her.
Yeah. Nobody loves me, not even my mother. But I don't love anybody either. Not my mother and not you. I hate you.
Yeah, but you never believe her when she says that.
She's just protecting herself.
Yeah.
They start begging, and then someone asks, well, then why are you begging? And they say, the boys, to find out what effect it has to observe people's reactions. So that is what a writer clearly does.
Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to delve into other people.
So what they do is she walks off shouting dirty little hooligans and impertinent too. And on our way home, we throw the stuff that they begged for and got, the apples, the biscuits, the chocolates, the coins into the tall grass. It's impossible to throw away the stroking on our hair.
I know. I underlined and put a star next to that line, too. It's so they're stuck with it. It's something
but that's
that troubles them the most, affection.
They can't throw it away, so what does it mean? Does it mean nothing to them?
No, I think it
do they want to throw it away, or do they not?
It's the most permanent thing that they have. It kind of affects you on a spiritual way, and you can't get rid of it. So I think for them
it's impossible to throw away.
But it's a bad thing.
Do they want to throw it away?
Yes. I thought it was like they wish they could get rid of that moment of affection. Because interesting, they'll interact with people when they express sexual desire.
Yeah.
Like whenever anyone wants children to perform in a sexual way with them, they'll do that because they see that as a physical need. But when anybody asks for emotional love or kindness from them, they refuse to give it.
I see, yeah. Well, yeah, need is important to them. If they perceive someone needs something, they give it to them, to their ability. So I thought there's a communism thing going on here, to each according to their need, from each according to their ability. I don't know if that's...
They're very into sharing in a weird psychopathic way.
Yeah. Well, here we are. Finally, I keep saying we're here, but we are here. Hairlip is the name of the chapter. And they see her. She doesn't see us, but she lies down in the grass and lifts her skirt. She isn't wearing underpants. We see her bare buttocks and hair between her legs. We don't have hair between our legs yet. So then she has sex with her dog. And so my question is, okay, so why did we include that in the book? It's not, I don't think, for shock value. It's not that. Is it to show that she's kind of feral? You just said that you think that it's because she's so desperate. Does she think having sex is the equivalent of being loved?
Yes, Hairlip does. I mean, possibly because she was molested by the priest, so she sees the only form of acknowledgement as love. She's just craves human touch, like her mother never touches her, and it's such a basic need for her.
But she's not getting a human touch, she's getting the claws of a dog.
I know, but she's probably fantasizing. Because it comes so close to the beginning of the book, I think it is put there a bit for shock value, and also for the writer to tell you right off the bat what kind of book you're getting into and how you read it and what the boys are going to witness. And they're not holding back on anything. They're just going into the very transgressive, taboo sort of strange thing that goes on in civilian life during wartime. Yeah, it's just, she's saying she's going to transgress every sexual moral code in this book, I think. Yeah, and I think it has to do with childhood also, because I think the childhood sexual imagination is so strange and made up of such peculiar fantasies because you don't actually know what goes on in sex, but you have these odd urges and they start coming into your mind.
The dog just takes a few back and forths, and that doesn't give her, I can't see that giving her much pleasure.
No, she's just experimenting. I don't know, that scene, you could read it in so many ways, and it's just the brutality of... Also, human beings around her are acting like animals. And
Yeah.
everyone who does have sex with Harlip in the book treats her in the same manner that the dog does, where there's just perfunctory and then toss her aside.
Right, for their own pleasure, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then she says, only animals love me. Only animals love me.
Yeah. And it's also how far Harlip will go for some sort of affection.
Yeah, they say never a lot, too. We never say anything to anybody, and we have no mother. No one will see us. We never say anything to anybody. I guess they're saying they're not going to squeal on someone here. We never cry.
Yeah, they
always
created
say
these
that.
rules.
Yeah.
These rules that involve, so many of the rules involve negation of things they don't do. And they almost see those human emotions as leading, maybe because it's wartime, into savagery in this corrupt society. So they're just like, we're not doing any of those human things anymore. We're going to be just logical.
Yeah. They're also going to get used to bearing hunger.
You know what line I thought lovely, though, is when they find out their mother has been sending letters to them.
Oh, I did too.
And they take turns carrying the letters under their shirt.
Yes. Turns. Yes.
And that was, at that point in the book, they still have an affection for the mother.
Yeah, the witch is hiding the love.
Yeah, people call her stingy, but she's so incredibly selfish that she won't give anything to anyone until she... Even if there's nothing for her in keeping them, there's no benefit in her keeping the letters to the children from their mother.
No,
except that there's no benefit also in her giving them. She doesn't like to give other people pleasure. I guess she's had such an incredibly hard life. She's turned into like rock for her brain.
Well, I suppose that she
Tangled root.
poisoned her husband. And she goes to his grave and she says, "Shit, bastard, pig, scum, demon." So I guess there's an anger issue there. But he could have been a complete monster too.
I'm assuming he was, for her reaction. And there's obviously so much coldness in the grandmother's life.
Yeah.
And that I think too, because nobody was ever kind to her, she just refuses to do it for anybody else. I think that's an interesting perspective, because I think a lot of people end up feeling that way, where when you're given nothing in life, it's harder for you to be generous. Because then you feel, why should I be, like, nobody gave anything to me. So it's quite a remarkable feat when nobody's given you anything to then be a generous person and give back. And
We make traps and drown the mice we catch in boiling water. They're psychopaths.
oh yeah, that was a scene that replays itself in my brain from time to time when they attempt to murder the cat and hang the cat.
Yeah.
But are they psychopaths, or have they temporarily become psychopaths? They've almost forced themselves into being. In the same way that soldiers go out, like the adult males are soldiers who go out and have to kill, then they've decided to become soldiers, but in the childhood home, which they see as equally dangerous to being out in the battlefield.
They have to become killing machines.
Yeah.
That's why war is so awful, and we've been blessed to live in a period where there hasn't been World War, at least. But I don't know if people really appreciate the horror of it. That's why these are such important works. We take turns carrying her letter under our shirts.
Yeah.
That's how one of the chapters ends off. Yeah, it's all in the present tense.
I think it added to the universality of it, because the book refuses to adhere to a date, refuses to adhere to a place. It's in the land of fairy tale, where it exists kind of beyond time and space.
Has that influenced you to write more in the present?
To write like in the present tense, it's a hard one to carry off. It does have, like, a lot of the things she's able to carry off, it's because it's such a short book.
I like the fact that they talk about you have to have a little bit of money in order for you to be able to steal something, because you have to go into the store and buy something when you're stealing something. These are all little tips, I guess, and advice on. And then there's a priest, and there's this great little line here on page 70. He says, "I never did anything to Hairlip. I don't even know who she is. She must be making things up. The stories of a mentally deficient child will not be taken seriously. No one will believe you. Everything she says is untrue." And we say, it hardly matters whether it's true or false. The point is slander. People love scandal.
I know, they're so terrifyingly wise. The adults just don't know how to deal with them. Like, I love the reaction sometimes when adults are trying to have a conversation with them, then they say something that's totally psychopathic, and the adult's just like, okay, just get out of my store. Take what you want. I don't want your money. Just go. You're freaking me out.
And then the priest says, "Come every Saturday, but don't imagine for a moment that I'm doing this because I'm giving into your blackmail. I'm doing it out of charity." And we say, that's exactly what we expected of you, Father. Hypocritic liar. Page 72. People are all poor or are afraid of becoming so. The war has made them stingy and selfish.
Yeah.
Okay, we're working the way through here.
One thing that I really thought interesting was when they began performing. In one of their acts, they dress up as clowns and they go into the town and begin performing little clown shows. And I thought that really tied it into absurdism and like Waiting for Godot. And we're in like a Beckett-like landscape where things are tortured and broken, but we don't know where we are. So the land is so in such turmoil that we've entered a kind of interstate. So I like that. This book does have some of the rules of absurdist literature, and it's the twins creating these absurdist rules that you'll follow. So I thought that was a nod to a lot of the absurdist theater that came out after World War II. And also, how do you deal with reconciling what happened and trying to go back to normal?
Yeah, I think that is part of the point, is there is no normal. Things are so fucked up.
Yeah.
Not to get too profound here, but people die, and that's fucked up. So if that can happen, if someone who's dear to you just disappears, anything goes.
Yeah.
If you ask me. Really. Like, so where'd they go? What was that all about? Like, how are you supposed to grasp that?
Do you mean just death in general?
Yeah, death as a kind of a baseline. Just think about our lives. It's
I
weird.
know, we craft such an incredible sense of meaning, and then it can be just taken away by an accident.
Exactly. In a second, you can lose everything.
Yeah, when accidents happen, just everything is up for grabs. There's no meaning.
Yeah.
And that's probably what because in a wartime that absurdism, the accident is so much more part of daily life that the two boys keep kind of insisting you can't get attached to life.
Well, it's also other people. It's not accidents. It's someone killing someone else in front of you.
But it seems so accidental in these wars, like who survives and who doesn't. And the idea of being a survivor, in so many instances, it just has to do with luck and chance. It doesn't have to do with, inner strength or anything.
Well, like how their mother dies, gets blown up in front of them.
That's one of the most troubling, actually, parts of the book for me, is that scene with the mother. Because she comes back towards the end and asks them to come with her, and they're going to go to a foreign country.
Yeah.
But they refuse to go with her.
That's right. Bizarrely, they want to stay with their grandmother. It's almost like an affection. Is it an affection? What is it?
I'm not sure. I mean, part of them, I think there's a deep anger towards her for having left them in the first place.
Yes.
There's a feeling of, maybe that's just they just can't be someone's children anymore. And she wants them to come back to who they were.
Well, she just swoops in, doesn't she, too?
Yeah.
It's so immediate. It's like, okay, we got to go now.
And she hates the grandmother and the town, and they have really become very much like the grandmother and the town and fit into that sort of life. So, or maybe they just think they see her as weak when she returns.
It's weird, though.
They seem to be judgmental about the fact that she's had an affair on their father and has a new little baby in their hand, too.
Yeah.
But obviously, as a reader, you feel so much empathy for the mother. And you're like, oh, God, go.
It's not what she wanted. It's not what she wanted.
Yeah. And it just seems like such a better option to go off with the mother than to stay with the grandmother. But in the end, I think they're just not children anymore, and they need to survive on their own, and maybe they can't follow anyone else's rules. Like even with the grandmother doesn't try to impose rules on them anymore. She doesn't chastise them when they attempt to murder people. She's like, I don't know, you little maniacs must have had a reason, but I'm not going to go there.
We never pray. We, as you know very well, we want to understand.
Yeah, that's a great line.
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about the notebook in which everything is written. It almost sounds like the Bible. It's like their Bible.
I know, there's some of the imagery in this book is just so beautiful. Like the way even how they have it so that you're imagining these two twin boys in some dark little farmhouse are writing the words for you. Just gives it a magical feeling. Which brings back to when it was first introduced to me as this magical book with no specific origin.
Yeah, they're always looking through holes too, aren't they? What do you make of that?
I don't know. Maybe that was there's a lot of ways of seeing that. It does kind of speak a bit to the role of the writer as being very invasive of everyone's privacy and intimate lives. I mean, who tears apart ordinary mortals more than fiction writers? You know, they really go after all their foibles and indecencies.
They do come across a camp, like a concentration camp, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. We think they killed them first, then piled them up, poured gasoline over them, and set them on fire. We vomit. And then they go and talk to their grandmother. Yes, grandmother, we took a good look. There's nothing there. It's another case of just...
no meaning. Absolute.
Or not accepting or pushing reality away. What happened is not there.
Yeah, or extreme existentialism.
Okay, we're moving in toward the very end here. Because what happens is everywhere we hear gunshots and cries of women being raped. So my thought was, there's no way that can be the Allies doing the raping. It's got to be the Russians. That's my Western thinking.
Yeah, there's some reviews and essays who kind of try and pinpoint everything to what it is historically, but I just never do that because I kind of like it being in this archetypal reality.
And it's awful the way Harriet dies. She gets raped by like 15. Yeah. But she doesn't let it lie. I don't know if it's her mother that's saying this, but yeah, she dies in a pool of blood and sperm, and her mother says she died happy, fucked to death. I think that was her mother.
Yeah, that's her mother. Her mother also asked to be killed herself right after she witnessed that. So I don't...
That's right, this is where she says...
It's sort of the mother trying to put some strange spin on it. Or again, like her mother too is kind of like the grandmother in that she's so brutal and refuses affection towards Harelip, and it's almost because she knows this moment is coming, and then she just kills herself other than kind of deal with the situation. She just throws off this flippant line, but then at the same time asks to be killed.
they say, do you really want to die? And what else could I want? So they slit her throat.
Yeah.
Our country is surrounded by barbed wire.
I know. I underline that line too. It's so visual, and then it creates such an imagery of separation, because now they're entering where they're occupied, and it's going to become a fascist state.
When our work is done, we hang Mother's skeleton from one of the attic beams with the baby skeleton clinging to her neck. Jesus. There's an image for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and in adding to these things, these moments all the time, it just always keeps you suspended in a war novel.
Yeah.
Like, you never know when you turn the page what brutality you're going to face. And I think that kind of mirrors being in a war where they don't know what's going to happen the next day. There's sort of no predicting how monstrous it could be. And you feel that turning the page. Like, you'll be reading a page and they're just fishing, and then all of a sudden there'll be a dead body in the water with missing eyes. So it's always... Each one takes you off guard, but you're still... Oh yes, I'm in this world where that is a possibility.
Yeah, it's shocking like war is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she's doing.
Yeah, in the same way in war, where you're constantly seeing these images you just don't even... They're somehow unspeakable. In the same way, these unspeakable images keep appearing in the book.
Yeah, and also it talks just finally to how relationships get shattered. And like the very end is the father comes back and I guess he wants to be with them. And they go through an elaborate plan to escape, and then...
He doesn't even really want to be with them, because he comes back once, finds out that their mother has betrayed him,
yes.
And then he leaves. And then he just returns because he wants some way of escaping, and he understands that his children probably know a way to escape. Isn't that it?
I don't know. I only read it yesterday. Well, see, it's funny. We're reading this close. I'm reading this closely, and it just goes to show you how much you miss, even when you're reading something as closely as you can.
Oh, I know. Always.
And
every time you read a book, it's a different book, because your brain is picking up on different things.
And you've gone through new experiences.
I know, and what resonates is so different. I always find that so fascinating to reread books at different times in your life.
That's what makes great books,
yeah.
Right? But yeah, just finally then, and this is after the father gets blown up trying to escape, and the line is, yes, there is a way to get across the frontier. It's to make someone else go first.
Yeah.
So again, like the relationship between the mother and the father it just non-existent.
Yeah.
It's like they obviously just don't care. They just see him as no one worth protecting or...
Yeah, and I think they just have more affection to the grandmother. They've transferred their loyalty to her somehow.
And there's absolutely no affection for the parents, it seems.
No.
Zero.
No, she's like the grandmother and they take on her sort of hatred of their parents as being weak, and they just disappear when things get rough, which is essentially what they do to the children. I mean, obviously they have their reasons. They're trying to survive a war, and the father had to go to the front and was taken as prisoner. So he's had no way to look after the boys, but they still, I don't know if they judge the parents, but they just feel that separation. They just like cut the strand, like they cut the umbilical cord themselves in order to survive, and they can't go back.
And I guess in less dramatic terms, that's what a lot of us do.
That's what a lot of what?
That's what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be hurt.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this didn't hurt at all.
Yeah, it was fun.
Great. Thank you for doing it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Heather O'Neill is a Canadian novelist, poet, short story writer, screenwriter and journalist. You do anything else? Or? And your forthcoming novel is When We Lost Our Heads. And it's about 19th century Montreal.
Yeah.
And it's available February 2022.
Exactly.
Thanks again.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I can do about the trucks, but...
And if it's too rumbly, I don't even know if we could do that again. We'd have to do another novel.
It would be completely different, yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to just do a new book.
Okay.
Bye.